But the one thing about technology that's interesting is that the asymmetry of power, that you could have a very powerful authoritarian state, it has not been able, notwithstanding the mass crackdowns on lawyers, notwithstanding the torture on the mainland, notwithstanding the killing of untold thousands in 1989 of tanks, they have not, the Communist Party has not been able to shut down people, Chinese people, who continue to work for a whole range of human rights. So that's number one. The second thing we haven't really mentioned is that Hong Kong has always been, since '89, the only city, and I will say within formal China, that has over 100,000 people every year on June 4th remembering. It was Hong Kong students, it was Hong Kong journalists who went up to Beijing to support the democracy movement. And there are very moving stories of the protesters knowing that the tanks were coming. But they said, let the Hong Kong students, they must make it safely back because they will tell our story.
Can the Beijing regime tolerate Hong Kong? Isn't Hong Kong a fundamental threat to this whole control regime?
Half of Hong Kong is a fundamental threat. The part of Hong Kong that can be its golden goose that lays the golden egg, they like that pot. But that goose isn't living in a free-range farm. And they want that golden goose to absolutely, be like, keep laying those eggs, but, you're going to have no air, no this, no that. So they're trying to do something impossible. They're trying to keep half of Hong Kong denying a reality of who and what Hong Kong is, because Hong Kongers we have had a history of freedom, and we have had a history of working courts and independence. You can't just wipe it. Sympathy for mainlanders. I know, because I also teach human rights seminars at some institutions in Hong Kong, that mainlanders participate in the demonstrations. And I can tell you, when they participate in the demonstrations in Hong Kong, 1 million people, their parents back home on the mainland will get a knock on the door and a visit from the public security saying, your daughter, your son is in those marches, tell them to stop. So they're both in Hong Kong, mainlanders in Hong Kong, are very, it's not just what you see in the media of them fighting and protesting and fighting. There are Hong Kongers who support and are inspired by, that's what Beijing is afraid of. They're afraid, that's why they first censored everything, and then suddenly they realize, oh my gosh, we can't censor it. Everybody actually has those illegal VPNs, and they are getting the information. So then they started doing the disinformation, because the blackout didn't work, so they started the disinformation. The other point is that there are mainlanders from the beginning in June who have expressed support for the Hong Kong democracy movement online. What has happened to them? Arrested, detained, threatened, intimidated, etc. So notwithstanding the full force of an authoritarian police state, they're not able to shut it down. And Mr. King, they're not able to tell mainlanders who do see what they're seeing and who are not afraid and are willing to also pay the price to support Hong Kong's movement, because they understand that if Hong Kongers can hold the line, then the mainlanders who also want democracy and freedom can also have a chance. But Hong Kongers are the front line.
Well, I want to join my colleagues in thanking you all. It's hard for us to conceive of the courage that it takes. There's no doubt that in this room today is someone reporting to Beijing about each of your testimony.
Right. That's right.
And
so please make sure we're stated properly. I don't want any misquotes.
And I want to thank you for your courage to speak the truth. And hopefully we will be able to pass some of this legislation to make it clear to the regime in Beijing that democracy is an important value, and that we're just not going to pay lip service to it. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank this panel for coming before this commission, providing some perspective and expertise on this important and very timely topic. As many of you know, I spent more than 5 years living in Guangzhou, and part of that time in Hong Kong. Back in the 1990s, when I was in the private sector, raising a family. In fact, we have 4 children. Our 2 youngest children were both born in Hong Kong. I'm deeply concerned with the ongoing erosion of autonomy and human rights in the region, and I will tell you I stand with the citizens of Hong Kong. In fact, just this past month, I helped lead a legislative exchange between the U.S. and 6 LegCo leaders who came to my home state of Montana. This event was important to better understand the situation in Hong Kong and identifying what some of the key issues were and have a very open and free exchange. As the leader of the free world, we, the United States, and the entire world must continue to support the autonomy and the freedoms of Hong Kong. It is one country, 2 systems. I was in Hong Kong on June 30th, 1997, and saw the Union Jack come down for the last time. The Hong Kong central government needs to work with protesters to accept the demands put forward by the citizens of the country, and the use of excessive force by the police must end immediately. We must continue to work together towards building a strong relationship between our 2 countries. The question, I'll start with Mr. Wong. The protesters have formed a consensus around 5 demands, including withdrawal of the extradition bill and, of course, universal suffrage. Does the government need to comply with all 5 demands immediately, or is there a phased or alternative outcome that might be acceptable?
Hong Kong people fight for free election and universal suffrage since 3 decades ago, even earlier than I born. All the 5 demands is the consensus of Hong Kongers took to the street in the past 3 months, and all those 5 demands are also within the existing constitutional framework, especially Beijing make the promise in the Sino-British Joint Declaration and recognize the importance to let Hong Kong people enjoy freedom and autonomy, especially with the quote of Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong. So I would say that democracy movement and protests must continue until the day we have democracy, even we strongly experience the state capitalist regime crackdown on Hong Kong human rights. So I would say that now we have continued our summer of discontent and becoming the year of discontent. We just hope the world to understand more how Hong Kong people were in the difficult time in this long-term and uphill battle.
Let me, if I could, interject. Thank you. I've got a vote
Yes.
coming up. I've got to get to. I'm probably going to get there quickly. But a follow-up question: how do you expect Chief Executive Carrie Lam? How do you think she'll respond to these demands? And how much power does she have to make concessions, or would Beijing have the final say?
That's an extremely good question. Carrie Lam is a puppet government handpicked by Beijing, and she is not the decision maker. What we realize is withdraw the bill or not, stopping police brutality or not, or allowing Hong Kong people enjoy free election or not, all depends on Beijing authorities instead of Chief Executive of Hong Kong. Carrie Lam doesn't have a say on it. She's just following the order from Beijing authorities, especially on how the State Council in Beijing regularly hold a press conference in the past few weeks to criticize on Hong Kong protests. It already showed that how Carrie Lam can't solve the political crisis by her personal capacity.
All right, thank you. I'd love to keep the discussion going longer, but I've got to go down the
We
floor.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. And I think Mr. Smith has one additional question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I do appreciate it. If I could, and Ms. Hom, you did mention it, and I think it bears a little further scrutiny. One of the notions of there's no such thing as a free lunch, in my opinion, applies with on steroids to the issue of Confucius centers, which are just agents of influence, pushing the Beijing line. In the past, in both my subcommittee on human rights, which I chaired, and this commission, I've held a series of hearings on Confucius centers, as well as on those entities, universities, colleges that get access to the mainland China especially, and get an enormous number of perks, money, physical plant venues for their colleges or universities, including NYU. And matter of fact, I had the chancellor of NYU testify at one of my hearings and asked that I could go and speak, and he allowed me to come and give a speech or a lecture on human rights in Shanghai at the NYU campus. But the concern is that there are en route to 1,000 or something like that globally, that is to say the Chinese government with these Confucius centers. We have 96 in the United States, 82 are public, 14 are private. One of the things that I'm most concerned about, and Rob Portman and I asked for a GAO report on this that finally came out in February of this year, and that is to look at the terms and conditions, which really is mostly secret, but we have a situation where hand-picked teachers come to the United States, come to Africa, go to Africa, I should say, Latin America, everywhere, and they seemingly are doing education in the language and culture, but it's all about the worldview and the domestic defense of Xi Jinping's policies, including Hong Kong. My question very specifically is, what are the Confucius Centers? Do you have any insights as to what they're saying about what's going on in Hong Kong right now? And those universities and colleges, US-based, that are in China today, what are they able to say and do without fear of retaliation, like at the NYU campus in Shanghai, about this great human rights, pro-democracy effort on the part of all of you in Hong Kong?
Start off. Thank you. I think it's important also to note that the Confucius Institutes and the pushbacks have also been led by really active, wonderful activism by Students for Free Tibet and the Tibetan community supported by the Uyghurs, and I think they've had some really good victories that show you really can push back and get the institutions to be more accountable and reliable. I think the quick answer to what are they saying is what can they say will always be under the guideline right now. Under the ideological campaign that's underway, where every single party non-member has to participate in political study, that the line of the day, what can be reported in Xinhua, what can be reported in the news, everything will be determined from the top. And if you say anything, and as you know, under the new regulations, under the Cybersecurity Act for the news is defined very broadly to include opinion, commentary, including blogging, so you can't say, blog, think anything except what the line comes down. So when the line comes down in Hong Kong, currently, the line is, it is a riot backed up by black hands, led by the US, interfering in domestic an affair and violating China's sovereignty. This is the same old chestnut we all hear over and over, and they got to get a better story here. But that's what they keep saying, and so I think that is now the dominant what anyone can say. Because if you say anything against that, for example, you have a different idea. Not only are you violating the new news regulations, you're also running the risk of subversion, incitement, because that is defined as going against the party's views. So I think that's why it is so important that the authoritarian system in the mainland must change. It's got to change, or I think it's still, I think that Hong Kong people, I know I've heard some of my friends and colleagues say to the US, please save us. I actually have another angle on that. I think Hong Kong people will save ourselves. I think Hong Kong people are going to do it. What I think is necessary from the international community is please help make the human cost less, because it's very clear and heartbreaking that the young people are ready to go to the mat. And I think the key is, as I think the US government and this commission is doing, is to stand by so that the human costs can be mitigated a little bit.
Understood, but how do the teachers in the Confucius Institute get their marching orders?
So this is like going inside of a black box, but let me speculate. Yeah. I am pretty sure that all the curricula are approved and reviewed. I'm pretty sure they don't exercise academic freedom and say, here's a creative thing I can do about Hong Kong. I'm pretty sure that they're all approved curricula. How do we know this? Because you will see nothing there about 89. You will know, there are just big holes in that history, what's happening, and all of the, you'll probably read about the diverse ethnic groups in China, happy people, happy Tibetans, happy Uyghurs, you'll probably see that version of what is happening. So I'm pretty sure. The other thing is, if those institutes are also monitored. So if anyone says anything that actually challenges the dominant narrative, I'm pretty sure that teacher will be in trouble. So I think it's pretty tightly controlled, and the money is the, what do you see the word, the enticement to universities? And I think not only just for the Confucius Institutes, they sometimes come along with other really good goods like an endowed chair, like money for a chair, like money for a program. So I think there's this kind of collapse. Because Senator Daines left, can I say something to him anyway? Yes, okay, Senator, I'm so sorry, but I really think it's important. As somebody who loves Hong Kong, and personally and professionally, and as a member of from the private sector, I think we need to also remember that every single SOE, state-owned enterprise, has a party committee. And now that requirement has extended to companies with foreign investments and foreign companies. I had a Canadian company ask me, how could that be? Why are they making us establish a party committee? I said, you're not being targeted. All the companies will have to have a party committee. What does the party committee do? Review your personnel, review your management, review your business decisions, make sure everybody is ideologically pure, blah, 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 like that. And do they hide this? Not a secret. Look at the annual reports of China Telecom, China Mobile. They have pictures of the annual meeting of the party committee saying, we did good, the party committee's happy with us this year, we complied. So I think the American companies going in, there are listed SOEs. I think Apple Daily reported over 120 that are listed, 100 Chinese companies listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. They all have party committees within their management structure. So I think we need to look at that when you're looking at these other actors.
Thank you.
That's for you, Senator Daines.
Well, thank you very much. You've been very patient. You've been here for 2.5 hours. I'm the last person, so you have to bear with me just a little bit more. But this is this hearing is winding down. First of all, let me thank everybody for being here. I mean, everybody's testimony has been, I think, informative and has given us some marching orders, and I appreciate your responses to the questions. You know, Congressman Smith, earlier on in the hearing, referenced kind of the past inactions by the U.S. government in response to human rights abuses in China, and we've kind of looked the other way, or we've thought more trade would do it, or more this would do it, or whatever. Really, things haven't got any better. Things are continue to get worse. And I think it's fair to say that, for the most part, the U.S. government has been very good at kind of talking the talk. When it comes to Tibet, we issue the obligatory statement that we respect the rights of the Tibetan people to practice their religion, and we respect His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but the repression continues and there's no consequence. And I think part of what we're trying to do is change that. Just talk in and of itself doesn't end up changing anything. There needs to be a consequence. And so we're trying to move legislation forward that would impose that consequence. And I think it was very clear from everybody here that the Protect Hong Kong Act and the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act are important items for us to pass in the House and Senate. And I believe, and I can probably give you an assurance that we will do that. I mean, it doesn't happen here overnight. Senator Rubio talked about hearings that are happening in the Senate. We have assurances from the relevant committees in the House that they will move on this, and I believe they will come to the House floor and they will come to the Senate floor and they will receive bipartisan support. And so that will happen. So we get the message on that, and that is, and we will follow through. So we have our assignments. Mr. Wong and Ms. Ho and Mr. Zhang, you have traveled, and along with some of your colleagues who are behind you, and I want to recognize them as well, have traveled a long way at a very critical time in Hong Kong. And you've come here to build international support for Hong Kong. And I think it'd be important, for the record, for you to say, why it is so important that the international community and the United States support your effort. I mean, why that is critical to the success and what you are doing. And I also would like to get everybody's response to this, and that is, I have to be honest with you. I've been somewhat disappointed in the current our administration's response to what is happening in Hong Kong. I think it should be much more forceful, and I would appreciate your comments on advice that you would give the Trump administration on what they should be saying when dealing with the Chinese government. And we could begin with, why don't we begin with Dr. Garrett, because we'll end with Mr. Wong.
Well, speaking to the what advice we could give the Trump administration, I would say that U.S. responses have to be resolute, to use the Hong Kong term. If they're not hard, and if they're not unwavering, you will not get any respect from Xi Jinping's Communist Party. They will exploit it. The strongman aesthetic is what rules Beijing right now, and even in Hong Kong and tomorrow. So this deal making doesn't really mean much to them, because whatever deal that they make, they're going to subvert. Just like with the rule of law, just like what universal suffrage, just like what defense means in the Hong Kong Basic Law. It means something different. We call it party speak. And I think the administration has to be aware of this party speak and understand it. Second is that, as others have alluded to, on both sides of the Pacific, this is the first ideological confrontation of the new Cold War. Whether or not you agree it's a Cold War or not, the discussions have been out there, but it's perceived by both Beijing and people in D.C. to be an ideological confrontation. The people here, the witnesses here, the people in this room are looking to save Hong Kong's autonomy, to save the two systems. Well, in Beijing and some places in Hong Kong, they're looking to weaponize the two systems against the U.S. So this is not just an issue of getting a good trade deal from China. It's an issue much broader than that. The weaponization of one country, two systems, or the two systems specifically, is looking at how China can use Hong Kong's advantages, such as U.S. customs treatment of it, to exploit the world. We've seen it with the recent scandal at the United Nations, where Patrick Ho was basically found guilty of state capture of the United Nations to promote the Belt and Road Initiative. We've seen it earlier with China getting its first aircraft carrier from Ukraine. That was done through a whole series of deceptions and manipulations of Hong Kong's special status. And these types of things are still going on today, but we're not looking at, and this is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, it's very important to treat state-owned enterprises in Hong Kong and anybody affiliated with the CPPCC or the NPC differently than how we would treat regular Hong Kongers. Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
I really think that's a scary thought to give advice to Trump or the administration, but I think that any actions by the administration has to hold true to the U.S.'s core values. The U.S. has core values on human rights and democracy and freedom, and I totally echo. Hong Kong should not be made into a bargaining chip in some deal that's on the table. The ideological confrontation and the battle of the models is actually much more than that. It's really China against the world. It's not two models of equal legitimacy and equal, because the model that China is trying to attack and replace is the model that the international community, with Eleanor Roosevelt, in fact, playing a very key role in the Universal Declaration. It was a world order that came out to say we will never again have what happened in Nazi Germany. We will never again have mass detentions. We will never have mass trampling on human dignity. And so to take down that order, it's not about models. The Chinese models are not co-equal. It is a Chinese party model. And I think we should start framing it as China against the dominant world order. It is a dominant world order, and it still exists, and they can't treat it as if we could now change the model. And so I think on no consequences. There needs to be more consequences, but it's not totally accurate. It's very important to recognize that there are consequences already. When the US speaks up, when the Commission has this hearing, it's being watched and it's being listened to. I'm sure we're in living rooms in Beijing right now of some high official watching this, but
You're live on C-SPAN.
I'm on C-SPAN. you know, 香港人加油 is what I have to say to them. But so I think the consequences that we also should keep in mind is the party does want legitimacy. It can't stay in power through naked military bullying and force. It can get a long ways with bullying, but it can't stay in power without legitimacy. And that's what the whole international human rights system, the US holding on to core values, you don't have to give that up. You say, no, we're not going to give you that legitimacy. You're acting like a thug. We don't respect thugs. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. Mr. Zhang?
A quick response to your question is that I think China is getting more wealthy and is getting mighty. And that China is picking up all the fights with other countries in the free world. China is expanding their military in the South China Sea. They ignore the international court judgment and claim that they have the ownership of the South China Sea, which severely threatens the security in the Asia-Pacific region. And they even pick up a fight with Canadian regarding the Huawei incident. And who will really pick up a fight with Canadian? Only China, I think. And this is unreasonable, and that explains how assertive China is. And that's why I believe only the American, you are the only superpower that can really try to contain China. That's why we need the support from the US government. And regarding how China is doing a lot of silent invasion, I use the wording according to the Professor Hamilton in Australia. They are using a very silent invasion, using their economic dominance, try to colonize and control many local society in other countries. And many local society in other countries are already compromised, like some East Asian countries and like the country like Sri Lanka. They have to lease a military port to China for 99 years. And apparently this is a new imperialism for me, and I believe only US can contain China. And also secondly, I believe why US should be concerned about Hong Kong is that you have many interests in here, and you have to secure your interests. For example, a few months ago, when there is a US sanction that Hong Kong should not allow a ship which carrying the oil from the Iran. And the point is that Hong Kong government, they ignore the US sanction, and they allow the ship from the Iran to come to Hong Kong and try to carrying those oils back to Iran. And apparently this undermines your interests, and that's why this is one of the most important reasons you should care about Hong Kong, and you should do something instead of just maybe issuing statement to support Hong Kong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ho?
This historic fight in Hong Kong has only been possible with the determination of the youngsters and of the Hong Kong people. And I would really like to take this chance to thank the members of this commission and Chairman McGovern and Co-Chairman Rubio for the continuous attention on Hong Kong issues, and of course to the push of this act, because this has contributed in giving hope to the Hong Kong people in the way that it is telling the youngsters that their efforts is actually making a change in the world, and that we are not in an isolated struggle. It is a global fight. We are in the front lines of this global fight to protect these universal values that we all cherish. So hopefully by passing this act, we would be seeing a momentum in the international communities where other countries, they might join in and to preserve and to preserve these values, and also to monitor this totalitarian regime that is actually destroying these values on a daily basis. So thank you very much.
Mr. Wong.
With the sharp power expansion from China to Canada and Australia, the Belt and Road Initiative implies how China takes advantage in European country, economic advantage in European country, and how China do not respect on international order after entering WTO, after promise on joint declaration, and even having the negotiation with US on the trade deal. We all are aware the uprising China model is just the expansion of authoritarian rule and without any respect on international orders with liberal values. And that's imply and explain why Hong Kong matter to the world. Because Hong Kong people, we stand on the forefront to confront the authoritarian rule. And Hong Kong people is aware that Hong Kong is the forefront and we will confront the authoritarian crackdown. If Hong Kong fall, and the next may be the free world. And I strongly realize now is the time for the US Congress to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. And also, I hope US government could reveal its foreign policy to China to prioritize human rights issue, especially now we are not only suffering in the political, but even humanitarian crisis. The first time for me to be in prison is 2 years ago. I remember I watched TV news on how Beijing authorities announced the no term limit for president in the future, which just let me realize that when I was in prison, and the one who locked me up in prison, which means the authoritarian rule represented by President Xi, will be the Emperor Xi. So that's the uphill and long-term battle. And in 2047, no matter me or Sunny or others, we will be at the age of 50. And I hope after 28 years, Hong Kong can still be our hometown with freedom and democracy. And I think it's the time to thank all the congressmen and senators in the past few years and even in the past few decades, really paying attention to protest movement in Hong Kong. We stand in solidarity. We stand as one. Hong Kongers never walk alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the staff of the Commission for all the work that they did in preparing this hearing. Let me thank, again, the panelists. And to our friends from Hong Kong, let me thank you for your courage and commitment. I mean, I think what is prompting action here in the Congress is, you know, your courage that we see unfolding on our television screens and we read about it in the newspapers. I have to tell you, I think for everybody here, you know, you have been an inspiration. And you know, as I said at the beginning of the hearing, you know, we're a diverse political group on this commission. But on this issue, we're in solidarity with you. We believe that the future of Hong Kong ought to be determined by the people of Hong Kong. And again, I can't thank you enough for being here. So thank you, and this hearing is adjourned.